Wow. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. You've been hearing about fires in Australia, I think, yes? So I want to do something for Australia this morning. So I didn't bring my rain stick today because I had so many things I was carrying. So we're going to do something called indoor rain for Australia in a loving, generous, prayerful way. And so we are going to become the rain. And so what I want you to do is to do what I'm doing, but do it as a wave that comes across, kind of like this is a sports game and you're all doing the wave, but we're not doing that. So each time I come across, I'll shift what I'm doing. Don't shift until I get to you. Okay, does that make sense? So we're going to start like this. You keep doing this over there. A couple of years ago, when we were evacuated from Reverend Carroll's home in Santa Rosa, it was Australian firefighters who actually saved our neighborhood. They set up a backfire up on the ridge in Annandale so that the fire that was approaching wouldn't come over the ridge down into our neighborhood. So I am very grateful for those Australian firefighters. And when you see that whole continent burning, it's really, I think, important for us to send as much cooling, soothing, safety, love, and moisture in our thoughts and prayers for them. So thank you for doing that with me. It's a good way to start the new year. So we're looking at cultivating 2020 spiritual vision this year. And it's not easy to have 2020 spiritual vision, I find, because I so often go off into the weeds where I'm either focused way too closely on what's immediately happening, or I'm so philosophical, I'm focused so much on the big picture out there that I'm disconnected from the experiences that are happening. Does this make sense? And so what I want is to have a 2020 spiritual vision that allows me to move between the two in that kind of infinity focus that lets me see all of it and embrace it somehow without feeling like it all belongs to me to do something about or fix. Because really our responsibility is just the piece where we are. And sometimes it's the piece where we are that's the most difficult. So for January, we're going to start at the very beginning. Now, if you saw The Sound of Music, there's a song called Let's Start at the Very Beginning. But also, in one of my favorite movies, The Wizard of Oz, when she goes to see the wizard, she says, well, how do I get there? And the good witch, Glinda, says to her, it's always best to start at the beginning and just follow the yellow brick road. And that's the beginning of the journey. So here we are at the beginning of January, getting ready to look into this new year and try and cultivate this 2020 spiritual vision. And generally what we do in January, or have done over many years, in all of our Centers for Spiritual Living, is we talk about the underlying basic principles of what we believe. Not because we can't think of anything else to do in January, but because all of us find value in re-anchoring into that deeper truth. So if you're new, this will be a good way to begin. And if you've been around a long time, maybe this morning will re-anchor you in the truth of what we know and what we claim as we go forward into this year. So I want to tell you about the vision of children. You know, I was talking to Amanda the other day about how I, as a kid, and still sometimes now, I tend to be very literal or on the nose. Like I take something very seriously, like that's exactly whatever it was the person said. And for the longest time, people would have to say to me, it's a joke, because I'm just so, took it so seriously and so literally that I wasn't generalizing to whatever else they were talking about. So this is a little bit like that. The children were lined up in the cafeteria of a Catholic elementary school for lunch. At the head of the table was a large pile of apples. And one of the nuns had posted a note on the apple tray saying, "Take only one, God is watching." And moving further along the lunch line, at the other end of the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. And there, a child had left a different note that said, "Take all you want, God is watching the apples." This is not only how we think when we're kids, it's sometimes how we just think in life. And so I want to just take an aside here for a moment to direct your attention to our 12th night altar over here, because today is 12th night. And in the Scottish tradition, it's a time to, as Karen Frost and I were talking about this morning, maybe it's an opportunity for regifting or an opportunity for, having taken advantage of after Christmas sales. But what they created for us this morning, the Frost family, is a 12th night altar with an enormous variety and number of homemade cookies. And so if there aren't enough snacks over there, or go here first and then go over there, I have to sit and the fragrance is wafting. So this may be a really short talk. Don't clap about that. Oh, no. So the question we're beginning with this morning is, what has God got to do with it? And God, this God that I'm using the quotation marks for, this God gets us into a lot of trouble. This God is something that in an awful lot of spaces is taken very literally in terms of what we've grown up with. It doesn't matter what religion it is or what spiritual tradition it is, but we carry, if we have one that we grew up with, a certain amount of spiritual baggage from that. In fact, one of our ministers who was raised in a family that was atheist said actually that was a great gift for her, because coming into Science of Mind, she didn't have to unlearn a vengeful God, a scary, punishing guy, a big, old male in the sky, a white guy who was mad a lot and occasionally was pleased, but you never knew if you really had it right. And there was definitely record keeping and score keeping going on. So that God, this is not the God that we speak of when we're talking about that word. And if that word makes you kind of twitch, I used to have a practitioner who couldn't stand the word when she first came into Science of Mind. Now she loves it, uses it all the time. God, we want to redefine that word kind of. So when we talk about this presence, what is this God? Who is this God that we speak of here in Science of Mind? Well, first of all, this God that we're talking about is everywhere all the time. Not making a list, just being aware. This God is limitlessly powerful. So there is no limit to that. And all-knowing. And all-knowing is pretty complex. It's all of our past, all of our future, all of our present, but it's all of everybody else's. It's all of the universes, and however many other universes there are or were or have been or will be, because in that presence, there's not a limitation in time and space. And that's hard for us to grasp. In what Ernest Holmes learned, our founder Ernest Holmes learned from Emerson, when he first started studying Emerson, was the idea that God is both immanent and transcendent. And when I say immanent, I'm talking about a word that is spelled immanent. It's not eminent, like well-respected, or imminent, like it's about to happen. It's immanent, which means that it is everywhere in everything all the time, wholly, fully, completely. So it isn't like God is, that part of God is over here at the practitioner table, and part of God is up there in the balcony, like God is just this really, really big person, where, who knows, we might be toenail fungus someplace. No, that because this, whatever it is, isn't limited by time and space, that means all of it is everywhere at every second. That's immanent. And transcendent means it's also beyond all that. So that's pretty big when we think in terms of time and space, right? That fills up everything, and more than everything that we can imagine, and more than everything that we didn't know we couldn't imagine. And also, we have the experience of this as personal, as if we are known, as if we are cared for individually and loved, because we are by this, whatever it is. And it's also impersonal in the way that creation occurs through it and through us, because it works the same way for everybody, everywhere, all the time, according to our embodiment and belief. So Ernest Holmes said that this, whatever it is a mathematical thinker thinking mathematically. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, although it does seem like you can boil down everything to zeros and ones if you want to. I don't really understand how that works, but, those of you who are IT people, you know that stuff. So we look at this, whatever it is, and what we simply say is, God is all there is. There's nothing outside, extra, other, different, omitted. It doesn't matter how good or bad we think somebody is, or some situation, or some place, or some behavior. None of it is ever excluded from the divine, because the divine isn't worried about any of that stuff, because the divine is not confused about who and what we are. Only we are. We're in the process of discovering and becoming the full self that we are embodied as in this sort of limited form that we're in. So this, all that there is, means that the possibilities and potential that exist where we are as us are not limited to what we've done or experienced in the past, or what anybody else has done or experienced in the past. That what we need is available. There is a mind in us that knows. And because it's everywhere and it knows, I like to think about this as it also knows how to make what I need to know so clear to me and so compelling that even I could not miss it. That is not too hard for this infinite presence. And so what I am responsible for then is not figuring everything out, but being willing to surrender into it and to focus my attention on what it is I want to draw into my awareness or my knowingness or my experience. Not as a difficult struggle and a victim-y kind of a thing, but as a throwing the doors open and welcoming kind of thing. This, all that is, it creates everything that we know of, time and space and form and experiences and history and newness and discoveries and revelations and all of it. It creates by becoming. Now, somewhere I read that every cubic centimeter of space contains more energy than all of the matter in the known universe. Think about that. Every cubic centimeter of space contains more energy than all of the matter in the known universe. So what that says to me is that what is unmanifest and is available as energy and potential is enormous compared to the physical universe. That's the potential that is available to be drawn into form and being. There's so much of it that we never end up with just one solid it. When Ernest Holmes wrote about this in his book, The Science of Mind, he called this, whatever it is, the thing itself. That was his name for God. That was how he started off the first chapter in the introduction of The Science of Mind. It's called the thing itself. And so when you look at the Science of Mind textbook, you'll find that he refers to God in a lot of different ways. And he does that to give us all access to it. So if God isn't a word that we relate to, then maybe intelligence is, or spirit, or soul, or power. And you can see these words, they're capitalized in the textbook because he's talking about something unlimitedly larger than our concept of any one of those qualities. Are you with me here still? Okay. And this isn't just New Thought or Science of Mind or Ernest Holmes. This is ancient wisdom. This permeates all of the religious cultures and philosophies and sciences as they're developing. And so I'm going to share a few of these quotes with you from different sources. Kabir wrote, "Are you looking for me? I'm in the next seat. My shoulder is against yours. When you really look for me, you will see me instantly. You will find me in the tiniest house of time. What is God? He is the breath inside the breath." Ernest Holmes said this, "The study of the science of mind," that's our philosophy, "is a study of first cause," that means God, "spirit, mind, or that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff and intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself." In the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel, it says, "Your soul is bound in the bundle of life which I am." And in St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he says, "There is one God and Father of us all, who is above all and through all and in all of us." In an ancient Vedic hymn from India, and the Vedas are older than pretty much every other scripture, it says, "I salute the supreme teacher, the one whose nature is bliss, who is the giver of the highest happiness, who is pure wisdom, who is beyond all qualities and infinite like the sky, who is one and eternal, pure and still, who is beyond all change and appearances, and who is the silent witness to all our thoughts and emotions. I salute the one, the supreme teacher." A Course in Miracles says the journey to God is merely the reawakening of the knowledge of where you are always and who you are forever. It is a journey without distance to a goal that has never changed. And finally, in Science, this was in Time magazine, December 28th, 1992. These are excerpts from this article. It's a science article. "The universe seems calibrated for life. If the force of gravity were pushed upward a bit, stars would burn out faster, leaving little time for life to evolve on planets circling them. If the relative masses of protons and neutrons were changed by a hair, stars might never be born, since the hydrogen they eat wouldn't exist. If at the Big Bang some basic numbers, the initial conditions, had been jiggled, matter and energy would never have coagulated into galaxies, stars, planets, or any other platform stable enough for life as we know it. Careful analysis suggests that even a mildly impressing living molecule is quite unlikely to form randomly. Then where did it come from? Paul Davies, the physicist and writer who's done the most to advance this view, puts it this way, quote, "The fact that the universe is creative and that the laws have permitted complex structures to emerge and develop to the point of consciousness, in other words, that the universe has organized its own self-awareness, is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on beyond it all. The impression of design is overwhelming." Now, I know you've heard people talk about intelligent design. And intelligent design usually seems to mean, God made everything in 7 days, there's no evolution, and then we all popped out at a certain point in time. And actually, what I think intelligent design is evolution. That's what it sounds like to me is going on here. That there is intention and freedom in this process of evolving. And as we're now evolving in our own individual consciousness as we choose to learn and grow and change. When I was a kid, I can remember my mom saying that certain people were set in their ways, and what that meant to her was they were stubborn. They didn't listen to anything anybody else had to say. They kept to their old habits, and they didn't grow. They didn't learn. Not that we all don't have some of that. I mean, have you ever been described as stubborn in your life ever? Raise your hand if you've been described as stubborn. Yeah, it's almost everybody. At one time. Good for you, Galen, only once. Yes, yes. I used to be married to a man who would occasionally sing to me, "Or would you rather be a mule?" Because he recognized that part of me that could dig in and get really stubborn. So when we're looking at this presence, what we need to remember is that who we are is not bound to the age that we are. Who we are is not bound to what we remember or how accurately we remember things like other people's telephone numbers or birthdays or their names or whatever it is, dates. It's not about that. It's about being open to grow in an emotional, spiritual, energetic, and sometimes intellectual way into deeper connectedness and connection with each other. And it takes intention to do that. It really does. It takes attention to do that. So when we look at the creation that we see in the universe, we might say, what initiates this? How does this get going in the universe, and how does it get going in our lives? Well, it is the nature of the infinite to express, to be expressed. I like to think of it as an overflow of creativity and love. Like this beingness has so much love and creativity in it that it overflows into form. It can't be contained in any way. And so it just overflows. And that wasn't even enough. And so it overflowed into a self-awareness of its own creation so that all of us could continue to overflow and create more. It's like multiplying the infinite in each one of us. Ram Dass used to say, all of this is God in drag. And I kind of like that. It reminds us of who we are, of what we are. That what initiates it is thought, but thought in capital letters, because it isn't just the words that we think in English that set this activity in motion. It is the depth of what we believe to be true, what we hang on to, what we fight for, what we believe is so. And a lot of times what comforts us to believe in is stuff that does change, but we have trouble letting go of it when it changes and morphs from something that serves us to something that doesn't. In The Science of Mind, our founder, Ernest Holmes, God is universal intelligence or spirit. And the only way intelligence can move is by an interior movement. Right, because intelligence isn't form. It's an interior movement in God. It's an interior movement in us. He says, God must move within God if God is all. It moves within and upon itself. God moves upon God. This is the starting point of creation. Every time one conceives an idea, it is God expressing itself. It is eternally knowing and eternally known through everyone. It is God's nature to know, and there is an emotional craving or desire for expression. It is inherent in the universe, in the grass, in the rain, and in us. And in Creative Mind and Success, which was an earlier book of his, he said, man must realize that everything in the manifest universe is the result of some inner activity of mind. Merriman and Morrissey likes to say, everything is created twice. First, in mind, it's an idea. Then, in form. So, everything in the manifest universe is the result of some inner activity of mind, capital M, mind. This mind is God, producing a universe by the activity of his own divine thoughts. Man is in this mind as a thinking center. And what he thinks governs his life, even as God's thought governs the universe by setting in motion all the cosmic activities. So, we have this big power. What are we going to do with it? What do we want to initiate in 2020? This is a new decade. And it is 2020. That's so interesting. The signal for perfect vision, the balance. What do we want to initiate individually? Now, when you came in today, you all received one of these little cards. And it looks like this. It has a picture of a ship. And although you might not be able to see it on this little tiny card, there is a person on the bow of the ship with a spyglass looking toward a beautiful city, a shining city. The sun is shining, the sea is sparkling, and this is the opportunity for us to set that intention. So I'm going to invite you to take your little card and hold it near your heart for a moment. And I want to invite you to close your eyes and imagine that you are the creator looking down on this gathering. That you are the infinite, seeing this room full of people and treasuring every single one and nourishing and fertilizing the qualities, the aptitudes, the abilities of every single one, sending a blessing to each one and all. And at the same time, you are the one receiving the blessing of this Creator and the calling of this Creator into something for this year. This blessing is settling on each one of us. It is not the Creator telling us what we need to do and be this year. It is rather like something within us is awakening and blossoming that wants to be brought forward more fully this year. It could be a quality. It might be a change in behavior or location. It might be embracing healing. So imagine that your heart is an open flower, and within its center, a word is coming forth for you for 2020. It might turn out to be more than one, or a phrase. Whatever it is, if you're willing, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes and to write it on the back of this little card. Now, Paula is prepared at the back with a myriad of pens, so if you need one, please raise your hand high and she'll bring you one. We ran out of cards, sorry about that. We've got a few extras over here. So just write down on the back of this card your word or phrase, however it came up for you. And you may not know what it is yet, but if you don't, what I invite you to do is to carry this card around with you in your pocket or your billfold or your handbag and look at it every once in a while, because you will know. So I invite you to stand up now with me, and we're going to say the affirmation on the front of it together. Today, I set a heartfelt intention for myself in 2020. I choose clarity and vision. I am free of past fears and doubts. My heart is open to receive my good now. Thank you. You can sit back down again. Those are for you to take and keep. And I want to share with you how simple it can be. Because this does not need to be saving the world. It might be something very simple. So I want to share this story with you. During the waning years of the Depression, in our small southeastern Idaho community, I used to stop by Mr. Miller's roadside stand for farm fresh produce as the season made it available. Food and money were still extremely scarce, and bartering was used extensively. One day, Mr. Miller was bagging some early potatoes for me when I noticed a small boy, delicate of bone and feature, ragged but clean, hungrily eyeing a basket of freshly picked green peas. I paid for my potatoes, but was also drawn to the display of fresh peas. I'm a pushover for creamed peas and new potatoes. Pondering the peas, I couldn't help overhearing the conversation between Mr. Miller and the ragged boy next to me. "Hi, Barry. How are you today?" "Hello, Mr. Miller. Just fine, thank you. Just admiring them peas. Sure look good." "They are good, Barry. How's your ma?" "Fine. Getting stronger all the time." "Good. Anything I can help you with?" "No, sir. Just admiring them peas." "Would you like to take some home?" "No, sir. I got nothing to pay for them with." "Well, what have you got to trade me for some of those peas?" "All I got's my prize marble here." "Is that right? Let me see it." "Here 'tis. She's a dandy." I can see that. Only thing is, this one is blue, and I sort of go for red. Do you have a red one like this at home?" "Not exactly, but almost." "Tell you what, take this sack of peas home with you, and next trip this way, let me have a look at that red marble." "Sure will. Thanks, Mr. Miller." Mrs. Miller, who had been standing nearby, came over to help me. With a smile, she said, "There are 2 other boys just like him in our community. All 3 are in very poor circumstances. Jim just loves to bargain with them for peas, apples, tomatoes, or whatever. When they come back with their red marbles, and they always do, he decides he doesn't like red after all and sends them home with a bag of produce for a green marble or an orange one, perhaps." I left the stand smiling to myself, impressed with this man. A short time later, I moved to Colorado, but I never forgot the story of Mr. Miller and the boys and their bartering. Several years went by, each more rapid than the last. And then recently I had occasion to visit some old friends in that Idaho community. While I was there, I learned that Mr. Miller had died. They were having his viewing that evening, and knowing my friends wanted to go, I agreed to accompany them. Upon our arrival at the mortuary, we fell into line to meet the relatives of the deceased and to offer whatever words of comfort we could. Ahead of us in line were 3 young men. One was in an army uniform, and the other 2 wore nice haircuts, dark suits, and white shirts, very professional looking. They approached Mrs. Miller, standing, smiling, and composed by her husband's casket. Each of the young men hugged her, kissed her on the cheek, and spoke briefly with her, and then moved on to the casket. Her misty light blue eyes followed them as one by one, each young man stopped briefly and placed his own warm hand over the cold, pale one in the casket. Each left the mortuary, wiping his eyes. our turn came to meet Mrs. Miller. I told her who I was and mentioned the story she had told me about the marbles. Eyes glistening, she took my hand and led me to the casket. Those 3 young men who just left were the boys I told you about. They told me how they appreciated the things Jim traded them. Now at last, when Jim could not change his mind about the color or the size, they came to pay their debt. We've never had a great deal of wealth of this world, she confided, but right now, Jim would consider himself the richest man in Idaho. And with loving gentleness, she lifted the lifeless fingers of her deceased husband. Resting underneath were 3 exquisitely shined red marbles. Sometimes, the vision that we're called to is simply kindness. It's simply taking the opportunity to expand in awareness of those around us and extend kindness. And so don't make it too difficult on yourself. Don't try to talk yourself out of something simple if that's what came to you or if that is what comes to you for your intention for 2020. Just remember that all of God is right where you are. And so what you bring forth is filled with the presence, just as it is, right where you are, just where it's given. Happy New Year. Namaste.